So this evening, I'm happy to be with you. My name is Eric Petty. I'm the lead minister at Skyline Church of Christ right here in lovely Jackson, Tennessee. And I'm thankful to be asked to speak at your summer series this summer. I'm sorry that I could not be with you in person. 2020's been kind of a mess, hasn't it? So, but I'm thankful that to be with you tonight to share with you, I think, probably my favorite miracle. And that is Jesus healing the woman with the blood disorder, and unknowingly, by the way. And I love this miracle because it's the story of two different people. Because this healing, this woman is healed at the same time a high-ranking official, Jairus, asks Jesus to come heal my daughter, right? And so it's interesting because I don't think you can, it's really hard to tell one story without telling the other because they fit together so well. And so we're going to kind of spin that a little bit, spin that web a little bit, I guess, tonight. So we're going to start in Luke chapter 4. Because I want to do a little background on Jairus here, and I'm going to start in Luke chapter 4 start in verse 31 here, because Jesus, Luke says, went to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and taught there in the synagogue. Okay, so he taught in the synagogue every Sabbath. There too, the people were amazed at his teaching, for he spoke with authority. Once, when he was in the synagogue, a man possessed by a demon, an evil spirit, cried out, shouting, "Go away, why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus reprimanded him and said, "Be quiet, come out of that man," he ordered. At that time, the demon threw the man to the floor as the crowd watched. Then it came out of him without hurting him any further. Amazed, the people exclaimed, "What authority and power this man's words possess! Even evil spirits obey him, and they flee at his command." Verse 37, the news about Jesus spread through every village in the entire region. So, why do we read that? Well, because Jairus was a leader of the synagogue in Capernaum. Could have been present, may have been present for this miracle when Jesus cast out this demon. Certainly was present at least at some point when Jesus was teaching. And as we read, the people were amazed at the authority with which he taught. Coincidentally, he probably wasn't Jesus' best friend. And even if he did have sympathy for Jesus, even if he did have a fondness for Christ. And even if he was one of the people who thought to himself, wow, the power of this man's words. And if he saw this miracle where Jesus compels this demon to come out of this man, if he saw it or if he just heard it secondhand, certainly there were questions, who is this guy? Even if he's not 100% on board, he could have a certain level of faith, or at least be asking some questions that he couldn't ask to anybody because he had to toe the company line, right? So with that kind of background, all right, Jairus, there's no doubt that he's heard Jesus teach in the synagogue. There's no doubt in my mind that he's heard him. If he wasn't present for that particular miracle, he at least caught wind of it from people that he trusted, and it was one of those things where you couldn't just write it off. So that's a little background on Jairus. And then we turn over to Luke chapter 8, and we see that maybe this did have an effect on him. Maybe this did have some impact on him, because Jairus comes to Jesus. Okay, so on the other side, starting in verse 40, on the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. So here's Jairus, this leader of the synagogue, a prominent guy. And he comes, and I don't know how long his daughter had been sick. I don't know, we don't know exactly what her sickness was, but we know it was incredibly serious. And I don't know what Jairus had done to help her before this. I don't know that Jesus was his last-ditch effort. But certainly you can see in the way that he approaches Christ and the humility with which he approaches him. He falls on his knees. We can see that Jairus is in a desperate state. He had waited and tried everything. But I think somewhere deep down inside, there was something tugging at him. There was something telling him, go ask Jesus. But if he goes to Jesus, then he risks losing whatever prestige he has amongst the religious community there. So there's a risk involved. So there's not a whole lot of doubt in my mind that Jairus had exhausted other possibilities before he went to Christ. Now she's on the brink of death here. I don't know how long she's been sick, but she's on the brink of death. And here's Jairus, this religious leader, this leader in the synagogue, and this man of some prestige among his community, and he is falling at the feet of Christ. He has humbled himself, and he understands his daughter's dying, and Jesus can cure her. That's where he is. So what would you risk? I guess the question is, what would you risk? Would you risk prestige? Would you risk your status to save the life of someone you love? It's not insignificant that he falls at Jesus' feet. There was some history there. Jairus' motivation is somewhat debatable, but I think it comes down to, what would you risk? What would you do? What would you give up to save the life of your daughter? So that's where Jairus is at this moment. So as we continue reading, we see that Jesus is going with him. And as Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. Now there's a woman in the crowd. And she suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe, and immediately the bleeding stopped. Now let's pause there for a moment, and let's take a look at the difference between Jairus and this woman. This woman had had this disease, this disorder, for 12 years. Which I don't know if I may be trying too hard here. But take note that as Jairus' daughter is being born into the world, as she is gaining life, this woman with the blood disorder is, for all intents and purposes, losing hers. She's gone to doctors. She's tried to find a cure. She may have exhausted all of her money, everything that she has to try to rid herself of this disorder. She's no doubt held as an outcast and unclean. She's unnamed, which is interesting. She's rejected by society. And she comes in also, as Jairus did. She comes in a desperate state, but she cannot face him. Instead, she's not even supposed to be in the crowd. She's not even supposed to be that close. She sneaks up behind him. She is crawling on her hands and knees to get to him, not to even speak to him, not to even ask, "Son of David, have mercy on me." But just with the faith, if I can just touch him, then I will be healed. And in many ways, like we just referred to Jairus, and perhaps Jesus to him was this last-ditch effort. For this woman, this was her last shot. She had waited on Jesus to return to Capernaum. so that she could crawl to him without him even seeing her. Hopefully, from her perspective, that he wouldn't even see her and she might be healed. And so she touches the fringe of his robe, and Jesus stops. Her bleeding immediately stops. She is instantly cured of her disease. And at that moment, Jesus says, "Who touched me?" What an interesting question to ask. What a crazy question to ask, right? I mean, if you look at the disciples, everybody denied it, and Peter even said, "Master, the whole crowd is pressing up against you." It's one of those things, it's almost comical if you can close your eyes and see it in your mind as it unfolds. This woman crawls up behind Jesus. She touches the hem of his robe, and he feels power. He says he feels the power that left him. Somebody touched him, and Peter's sitting here going, "Master, look at the crowd. Who didn't touch you?" Right? What are you even talking about? It's almost comical to think about. But Jesus insists. He says, "Someone deliberately touched me. For I felt healing power go out from me." When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. So here we are, two people of different backgrounds, different social statuses, both on their knees in front of Christ. Which, by the way, everyone ends up there at some point, on his or her knees at the feet of Christ. This woman is just hoping that she can get out of there. She's healed of her disease. Now it's exit stage left, and she's trying to get out of there, but the crowd is all around him, and he's insisting that somebody touched him with the purpose, he said, deliberately. They did it deliberately. The sole purpose was to be healed. I felt healing power leave me. Now, who was it that touched me? And meanwhile, this woman, this unnamed woman, who has been a reject from society for the last 12 years of her life, is finally cured of her disease. And she's so concerned about what Jesus might think about her now. She's just wanting to get out of there. But Jesus calls her out. And not for the reason that she thinks. She confesses to him. She says, when she realizes that she cannot stay hidden because she was trying to stay hidden, she begins to tremble. She falls to her knees in front of Jesus. And the whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. And in that moment, she's fearful. And in that moment, Jesus says something profound. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Now, I'm going to take some creative license here. Because when Jesus says, "Who touched me?" this woman is afraid. She's afraid for what she's done. She's afraid that she's going to be in trouble. She understands that she is busted. She is trembling and she is falling at his feet, and she confesses what she's done. She tells the whole story, how she's spent all of her money, how she's been a reject, how she understood that Jesus had healing power. She had heard the stories of him casting demons out in the synagogue. And she knew this was her opportunity to be healed. And she's fearful in that moment. But the reason, I am 100% convinced, the reason that Jesus wanted to point her out is so that he could look her in the eye and call her daughter. He called her daughter. And make no mistake, it wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was not Jesus just saying something that he thought sounded good. No, I think there was much more to it than that. Because in that moment, as Jesus is spending time listening to this woman's story, as Jesus is spending time trying to figure out who touched him and why, Jairus is over here waiting. His daughter dying. And at some point, he has to be thinking, are we going to get going now? My daughter's dying. Any moment now. We need to hurry and get there. And in that moment, I wonder if Jairus is thinking to himself, who is this woman? I'm the leader of the synagogue. I am somebody. This woman is nobody. And in that moment, Jesus, he eradicates all of that thinking. Whatever anyone is thinking about this woman, about the circumstance or whatever, Jesus blows that out of the water simply by calling her daughter. Because in that moment that he called her daughter, he told her she has value. He told her that she is loved. He told this woman that society rejected, I love you as if you are my own flesh and blood. And in that moment, I am certain that Jairus heard what was going on. And I am certain that Jairus heard Jesus call him daughter. And perhaps Jesus is even making a point to Jairus, saying, no one is more valuable than anyone else in the kingdom of God. That everyone is a son and daughter of the King. And as much as you love your daughter who is dying at home, that's how much I love this woman. In fact, this woman would represent all of humanity because Jesus would model the love that he had for all sons and daughters of the King by going to the cross for all of us, by shedding his blood for all of us. And he wanted to make a point that you have value, that you are a daughter of the King. Your faith has made you well. Now go in peace. And while he was still speaking to this woman that he called daughter, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, and he told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. But when Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith, and she will be healed. When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing, but he said, stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. But the crowd laughed at him because they knew she was dead. Then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, my child, get up. And at that moment, her life returned, and she immediately stood up. The woman who was healed of her blood disease, he called daughter. Jairus' daughter, who was dead and is now alive, he calls my child. There's no doubt in my mind that Jesus is expressing his love through his words in this passage. He is speaking value into every human being who would ever exist, no matter what society says about you, no matter how rejected you may feel. We are all sons and daughters of the King. Which, by the way, is a lesson for us. A lesson for us in that this woman represents all of us. This woman represents all of us who have, it may not be a blood disease, but We are afflicted with the evils of this world. We are afflicted with a choice that was made in the garden. A choice that we didn't make, but we live with the consequences. And too often, we choose what is not good for us. We choose to separate ourselves from God's will. We choose and we lean toward the things that we know God is not a part of. And time again, we find ourselves there. And Jesus comes along and He reminds us that you are daughter. You are son. You are adopted into the family of God, and Jesus has provided the path for that adoption. Jesus, through His sacrifice, has reclaimed us, renamed us, reshaped us in His own image so that God, not us, not anything that we have done, but God has made us holy through Jesus Christ. I love this miracle. And like I said, it may be my favorite miracle in all of Scripture. At least it is for tonight, right? But the faith of this woman is astounding. And I think the true nature and what really brings this miracle home for me is the way that Jesus treats her. When He shows her a love and a compassion that I have no idea how long it's been since she's been shown that kind of love and compassion. And Jesus reminds her, He reminds Jairus, He reminds Jairus' daughter, He reminds everyone in the crowd that all are sons and daughters of the King, and that Jesus did not just die for a chosen few, but He chose to die for us all. I hope that you'll go back and take a look at this and read through this miracle once again. It's a beautiful testament to Christ, and I think that this miracle it embodies everything that we love about Jesus and everything that we know about Jesus. That He was a champion of the underdog, and that He saw those that society no longer had use for. And that He revered every person, and that He valued every person, and He gave everyone a place to be. He gives everyone today a place to belong. And He tells this woman, and He tells us today, that you are valuable to me. And in the kingdom of God, we all have value. I thank you for the opportunity, once again, to present this miracle to you tonight. And I hope this has been a blessing for you. Thank you, and I hope you guys have a blessed week.